I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. Asterisk, I'd said no to the invite twice. I wasn't feeling well. I had work. I didn't feel like being around people, which for my family is code for I'd rather stick pins in my eyes than sit through another round of champagne toasts and thinly veiled insults. But Mom guilt-tripped me into it with a single line. It would mean a lot to your cousin. So I showed up, lip gloss, tight smile, black dress that I've worn to every family function since 2019, the one that makes me look more together than I feel. Asterisk, the restaurant was fancier than expected. Long white tablecloths. Too many forks. Menu with no prices. Waiters who said things like, "Would you like sparkling or still?" instead of just handing you a bottle of water. Someone had really pulled out the stops. Asterisk, and there he was. My cousin Daniel, beaming, standing a little taller than usual in his tailored suit, surrounded by nods of approval. The prodigal son, promoted to a senior executive role at some fintech company that sounded made up. Everyone clapped when he walked in. It wasn't even subtle. Uncle Mike literally stood up and whistled, like Daniel had just come back from war, not survived 3 rounds of corporate restructuring. Asterisk, I found my place card at the far end of the table, squeezed between a napkin and an ornamental candle that smelled like wealth. I sat down, avoiding eye contact with the aunties who'd probably already picked apart my outfit, my hair, my entire existence. Asterisk, darling. Aunt Linda leaned across the table like we were best friends. Still freelancing, are you? Her voice had that tone, the one people use when they say interesting about modern art they hate. I gave her my usual smile, the one that says, I heard you, but you're not getting a rise out of me tonight. Asterisk, dinner was 3 courses long, but felt like 9. The food was beautiful and joyless, all drizzle and foam. The kind of meal where you leave hungrier than when you sat down. I sipped my wine slowly, said that's great more times than I cared to count, pretended to care about Daniel's daily stand-up meetings, leaderships and other things that made my soul feel itchy. Then came the toasts. Uncle Mike stood first, obviously. Talked about Daniel's work ethic and hunger and how proud the family was. People tapped their glasses with knives. Auntie Sue followed with a story about how Daniel used to pretend to run meetings with his teddy bears. I thought I might scream. Asterisk, and then there was silence. That expectant lull, the space where someone else is supposed to speak. And that's when I saw it, Aunt Linda raising her glass, her voice sweet, sharp, and echoing just enough to carry across the table. Asterisk, well, she said, tilting her flute toward me, some of us should have done more with our lives, eh? Asterisk, a few chuckles. One awkward cough. Daniel looked down. Mum blinked at her plate like she hadn't heard it. Asterisk, I stared at her, not angry, not even surprised, just ... done. Asterisk, I picked up my glass, held it lightly, let the silence stretch. Asterisk, you're right, I said softly, but clear. I should have left this family sooner. And then I drank. The silence after my toast wasn't just awkward, it was seismic. Asterisk, you could almost hear the tablecloths shifting. Aunt Linda's face froze halfway between smug and stunned. Her mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to laugh it off but couldn't quite figure out how. Nobody moved. Even the waiter who had been topping up water paused mid-pour, his eyes flicking between us like he was watching a car crash in slow motion. Asterisk, I didn't flinch. Didn't smile. Just placed my glass back down, calmly, like I hadn't just cracked open a decades-old family wound in the middle of a seafood course. Asterisk, then the murmurs started, soft, nervous little chuckles, clinks of cutlery being repositioned, napkins being fiddled with, the sound of 100 thoughts no one would say out loud. Asterisk, Mum cleared her throat. Well, she said, too brightly, that was a joke, obviously. She reached for the bread basket like carbs might absorb tension. Asterisk, but Aunt Linda wasn't letting go. Oh come on, she said with a brittle laugh. No need to be so sensitive. It was just a bit of fun. Her voice turned syrupy, the way people speak when they've been caught out and want to pretend you're the unreasonable one. Honestly, you young people are always so dramatic. You can't take a single comment without making it personal. Asterisk, I looked her dead in the eye. It wasn't a comment. It was a choice. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. You chose to humiliate me. Again, asterisk, she blinked. Thrown. Humiliate. Oh, don't be so. Asterisk, you did the same thing at my graduation dinner. I continued. And at Granddad's birthday. And when I lost my job. You always wait until there's a crowd. You think if you make it a joke, no one will call you on it. The table had gone pin-dropped quiet again. Daniel shifted in his seat. He looked uncomfortable, like he wanted to disappear into his expensive suit. Asterisk, she's not wrong, he muttered, eyes fixed on his napkin. Asterisk, Linda looked at him, stunned. Excuse me. Asterisk, I'm just saying, he said, with a shrug, so forced it creaked. You do say some sharp things sometimes. Asterisk, now that was a twist. The golden boy coming to my defense. I didn't know whether to be grateful or suspicious. But either way, it cracked something open. Gave me enough air to keep going. Asterisk, do you know what it feels like? I said, slowly, to spend every family event waiting for the moment someone turns you into a punchline. Asterisk, Aunt Sue chimed in, clearly trying to de-escalate. Now, we're family. We tease each other, that's what families do. Asterisk, no. I said, that's what this family does. And not everyone gets teased equally. Some of us get support. Some of us get celebrated. And some of us get reminded, over and over, that we're not good enough. Asterisk, the truth landed hard. Like a dropped plate. Asterisk, I could see it in their faces. The flickers of guilt, the nervous glances, the way no one met my eyes for more than a second. My words weren't cruel, they were just accurate. And nothing terrifies people more than honesty they can't dodge. Asterisk, finally. Someone at the far end coughed and tried to ask about dessert. As if that might soften what had just been said. Asterisk, I sat back, exhaled. For once, I hadn't swallowed the insult. I hadn't laughed along, hadn't gone quiet. I'd said it. Out loud, in front of everyone. And no one could unhear it. It wasn't just the words. It was the smirk after them. The way Aunt Denise didn't even blink, like what she'd said wasn't cruel but casual. Like she didn't know how her voice could cut through skin and land straight in the soft place you try to keep hidden. The worst part is, she did know. She always has. Asterisk, the room shifted after I said it. My toast. My line, my tiny, deliberate explosion. There was a second, just one, where I thought maybe someone would laugh, or nod, or even lift their glass with mine, but instead, there was that sharp silence people mistake for awkwardness when really it's just shock wearing a polite mask. Asterisk, I sat back down like nothing had happened. Took a sip of flat Prosecco, and pretended it didn't taste like every Christmas Eve I'd spent counting the seconds until I could leave the table without being scolded for my attitude. Asterisk, Mum shot me a look. Not angry, just disappointed. The kind of look she's perfected. It's in her eyebrows, the way they pull ever so slightly together, like they're carrying the weight of all my unspoken potential. I think that look hurt more than Denise's joke, because Mom didn't defend me. Didn't say, hey, that wasn't necessary, or she's done plenty with her life. She just sat there, lips tight around her fork, pretending it didn't happen. Asterisk, that's the thing about families, like mine. You don't talk about things directly. You don't call out meanness or say you're hurt. You just swallow it, like cold peas or hard pills, and hope it doesn't get stuck in your throat. Asterisk, Jack didn't say anything either. My brother. He was on his third drink, half listening to whatever Callum was bragging about. Maybe he didn't even hear the comment. Or maybe he did and thought I'd earned it. Hard to tell with Jack. We were close once, when we were younger, before he realized it was easier to survive this family by blending in than standing up. Asterisk, I should have been used to this by now. It's not the first time Denise's mouth has been a blade. She's made comments about my job, my flat, my lack of a proper partner. Once, she asked if I ever regretted not freezing my eggs at Easter lunch. I was 29, but I never said anything back. Until now. Asterisk, it's wild, isn't it? How one sentence, one toast, can wake something in you. I felt it. In my chest. Like all the years of biting my tongue, suddenly gathered themselves up and refused to stay quiet. It wasn't even about Denise anymore. It was about everything. Everyone. The whole system of silent wounds and invisible rankings. Asterisk, you should have done more with your life. Asterisk, what does that even mean? Asterisk, I have a life. It may not look the way they wanted, husband, mortgage, promotion, cake with white icing and gold script, but it's mine. I get up, I work, I make my own decisions. I survived things they'll never know about because I never told them. I've helped people. I've laughed till my stomach hurt. I've healed, mostly, from things I thought would break me. Asterisk, but in this house, in this family, that's not more. That's just not enough. So yeah, Maybe I should have left sooner. And maybe, just maybe, I will now. Asterisk. I didn't leave immediately after that. I don't know why. Maybe I thought I'd regret it, or maybe I thought Mom would stop me. But she didn't. She just stayed silent, her face drawn in that same tired way, like it had been years since she'd fought for anything in this family. I could see the years in her eyes, the ones she didn't want me to notice. I could feel the resignation she never spoke out loud, but I wasn't going to get sucked back into it. Not this time. Asterisk. Denise tried to salvage the moment. She lifted her glass again, her voice too bright, too forced. Come on, everyone. Let's toast to Callum's success, to family, she said, practically singing the word, as if family was something we all agreed on, like it meant the same thing for all of us. It didn't. Asterisk. I could see the others nodding along, not really thinking, just following the script. They were used to this dance. Toasts and smiles, and then, quickly pretending everything was fine. And I was tired. So tired of pretending. Asterisk. I could feel Callum's eyes on me. He hadn't said anything. Not yet. I didn't want him to. I wasn't in the mood for his awkward attempts at kindness. The way he'd throw a word or two, my way to cheer me up. As if it was that simple. I didn't want to be cheered up. I wanted him to stop pretending we were close. I wanted him to stop pretending I wasn't just another piece in the family puzzle that didn't quite fit, but no one knew how to remove. Asterisk. Instead of saying something else, I just put my fork down. I'm going to step outside for a bit, I said, my voice low but steady. No one questioned it. They never did. I stood up, feeling every single set of eyes on me. But for once, it didn't feel as suffocating. It felt like relief. Asterisk. I stepped outside into the crisp night air, grateful for the break from all of it. The cool breeze hit my face, sharp and biting. The world outside the dinner table seemed quieter, somehow more real. There was no pressure. Out here, just me and the dark sky. Asterisk. For a while, I just stood there, looking up, letting the cold settle into my bones, feeling like it was washing away the tension I hadn't realized I was carrying. My chest felt tight. But this time, it wasn't from the usual family nonsense. It was from the realization that I was actually considering leaving. That this moment, this line I'd crossed, might be the one I'd never come back from. And the thought scared me more than anything. Asterisk. I leaned against the cold brick of the house, taking a deep breath. For a second, I thought about walking away. Leaving this all behind, walking down the street, getting into my car, and just driving. Letting the miles between me and all of them start to make it feel real. But I didn't. Not yet. Asterisk. Instead, I reached for my phone, scrolling through messages I didn't want to reply to, but my thumb paused over one from Mom. Everything okay? Come back in when you're ready. It was short, impersonal. But I knew what she meant. She was asking me to come back, to not make a scene, to just be the daughter she wanted me to be, the one who fits in, the one who swallows her pride and pretends nothing hurts. Asterisk. I put the phone down, then immediately regretted it. It wasn't Mom I was angry with. It wasn't even Denise, despite her cruel little joke. It was the way I'd let this family make me feel small. The way I'd let their opinions define my worth for too long. And now, after all this time, it felt like I couldn't breathe under the weight of it anymore. Asterisk. I thought about leaving again, really leaving, but something inside me whispered, not yet, not now. Asterisk. There had to be more to this. More to me than just their expectations. More to my life than their quiet, unspoken rules. Maybe this wasn't about leaving them behind. Maybe it was about learning how to be me in this world, without apology, without shame. Asterisk. But that meant finally facing the truth. If I stayed, I'd always be playing their game, and if I left, I'd have to build my own rules from scratch. But it was starting to feel like the only choice I had left. Asterisk. I stayed out there for what felt like hours. The night wrapping around me like a heavy cloak. The longer I stood there, the more I thought about everything, every word that had been said at that table, every glance thrown my way. It felt like a pressure cooker, slowly building until I couldn't ignore it anymore. I was suffocating. But it wasn't just the words Denise had thrown at me. It was everything that had led up to that moment. The way they always looked at me, as if I were somehow less than they were. The way I kept trying to prove myself in their eyes, always chasing their approval like it was a finish line that would never come. Asterisk. I glanced at my phone again, but I didn't have the energy to respond to Mom. The messages piled up, all of them. asking me to come back inside, to pretend everything was fine, to let it go. But I couldn't, not this time. Asterisk, a distant honk of a horn, broke my thoughts, pulling me out of the fog in my head. I looked down the street to see a car driving past, just a random car, but it felt like a sign, a symbol of escape. I imagined myself getting in, driving somewhere far away, somewhere quiet. No more family dinners. No more obligatory smiles. No more pretending to be someone I wasn't. Asterisk, I wasn't sure what stopped me. Fear. The uncertainty of what leaving would really mean. Or was it the simple fact that I wasn't sure I could handle the fallout? I wasn't ready to leave everything behind, but I was so tired of trying to fit into their mold. Asterisk, but still, the question lingered in my mind. Why do I stay? Asterisk, I felt like I'd spent so much of my life answering that question with the same tired responses. Because they're family. Because it's what's expected. Because it's easier than facing the fallout. But was it really easier? Every year, every family event, every comment like the one Denise had made, it was getting harder to pretend, harder to stay quiet, harder to live under their shadows, to keep swallowing the resentment that had been building up over the years. Asterisk, I thought about how things could be different if I just didn't care, if I didn't need their approval, if I didn't feel the weight of their expectations crushing me every time I tried to live my own life. I wanted to be free from it. Asterisk, but that freedom, it scared me. The thought of cutting ties with them, of no longer having a reason to show up, of no longer being a part of the family story they'd written for me, that was terrifying. What would be left? Who would I be without them? Asterisk, for the first time in a long while, I felt completely alone with that question, and it hit me harder than anything Denise had ever said. A sudden noise behind me broke my reverie. I turned to see Callum standing in the doorway, looking out at me. His face was neutral, unreadable. I wondered if he'd come out here to try and fix things, to offer some empty words of comfort. But instead, he just stood there, watching me. Asterisk, I wanted to yell at him. To ask him why he hadn't said anything, why he hadn't stood up for me, why he hadn't done anything to make this family different. But I didn't, I just stared back at him, waiting for him to speak. Asterisk, finally, after what felt like an eternity, he said, "Are you okay?" Asterisk, the words were so simple, but they stung. Of course, he would ask that. Of course he would want to make sure I was okay. As if it was something that could be fixed with a few words. Asterisk, I'm fine, I said, my voice sounding more hollow than I intended. I just needed some air. Asterisk, Callum nodded, stepping out into the cold night air with me. For a moment, he just stood there beside me, both of us silent. Then, softly, he said, I know what it's like. You know. Feeling like you don't fit in. Asterisk, I didn't look at him. Do you? Asterisk, he paused before answering. Yeah, I've always felt like the black sheep of this family too, in my own way, but we're all just trying to make it through, right? Asterisk, his words felt like an attempt to make sense of everything, to tie it all together with some neat little bow. But it wasn't that simple. It never was. Asterisk, I don't know if I can do this anymore, I said, finally turning to face him. I don't know if I can keep pretending like everything's fine. Asterisk, he didn't say anything to that, but I could see the shift in his eyes. The understanding. Maybe for the first time, he saw me, not as the family member who was always just there, but as someone who was struggling, who didn't have all the answers, who was starting to question everything. Asterisk, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to him. The silence between us felt different. Like it was okay to just be. Asterisk, we stood there in silence for a while longer, the cool night air filling my lungs. It felt strange, like I was breathing for the first time in years. I didn't know what had shifted in me, but something had. Maybe it was the conversation with Callum, or maybe it was the weight of everything I'd been holding in for so long, finally pressing down on me, forcing me to acknowledge it. Asterisk, Callum's presence, though quiet and non-intrusive, was comforting in its own way. For the first time tonight, I didn't feel entirely alone. It wasn't that I expected him to fix anything or offer me some deep solution. He didn't need to. Just having someone stand there, not asking for anything, not expecting me to perform or smile or pretend, felt like a small act of rebellion against everything that had come before. Asterisk, do you think they'll ever change? I asked, my voice a little more fragile than I wanted it to be. Asterisk, Callum looked at me for a moment, his brow furrowing slightly. Who, Mom and Dad? He asked. Asterisk, no. Everyone, the family. All of it, I said, gesturing toward the house. The endless dinners. The forced cheer. The same tired jokes. The way they all act like I'm some kind of outsider just because I don't fit into their perfect little narrative. He glanced back at the house, his gaze lingering for a moment, as if he could see the same things I could. I don't know, he said quietly. I think they want to believe they've got everything figured out, but maybe we've just outgrown them. Outgrown them. The words hung in the air like a delicate truth I hadn't yet allowed myself to fully grasp. I had always thought that somehow, I was the one who hadn't measured up, that I was the one who wasn't enough for them, for this family. But maybe it was the other way around. Maybe they were the ones who hadn't changed, who hadn't grown, and maybe, just maybe, that was okay. Maybe I didn't need to keep trying to force myself into their small, narrow view of the world. The thought was a little liberating, but also terrifying. Because if I truly outgrew them, if I accepted that, this family, with all its dysfunction and expectations, wasn't mine anymore, what did that leave me with? I glanced at Callum again, trying to read his face. He seemed so different from the person I'd grown up with, so distant from the brother I thought I knew. Maybe it was the years. Maybe it was the way we'd both slowly become aware of the same things. But I couldn't deny that I saw him in a new light now, not as the brother who played it safe, the one who always kept his head down and avoided the tension, but as someone who was quietly, subtly questioning the same things I had been. Do you ever think about leaving? I asked before I could stop myself. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked out toward the street, his expression unreadable. I held my breath, waiting for him to speak. I think about it all the time, he said finally, but I don't know where I'd go. I don't know who I'd be without all this. I nodded, feeling the weight of his words. I understood that. I wasn't sure where I'd go either. The idea of severing ties with them completely felt like stepping into a void, but there was a part of me that was willing to do it, if only to break free from the constant cycle of disappointment and suffocating expectations. It's hard, I said, the words slipping out before I could catch them. It's hard to know who you are when everyone else has already decided for you. Callum didn't reply to that. Instead, he just let the silence sit between us, thick and heavy, and I felt something in me settle. For a moment, it felt like we were both just two people, standing there in the cold, not needing to explain ourselves to each other, not needing to live up to anyone else's idea of who we should be. I think it's time, I said finally, my voice steady but firm. He looked at me, his brow furrowing slightly. Time for what? To stop pretending, I said, the words coming out with a surprising clarity. To stop caring about what they think. To stop trying to be someone I'm not. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep trying to fit into a family that doesn't even see me. Callum didn't say anything for a long while. He just looked at me, his eyes softening, his expression unreadable. But then, after what felt like an eternity, he gave a small nod. I get it, he said, quietly. I get it. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know what I was supposed to do after this. But for the first time tonight, I felt like I was standing on the edge of something. Maybe it was a new beginning. Maybe it was just the first step in a much longer journey. But whatever it was, I knew I wasn't going to go back inside. Not yet. Not when the air outside felt freer than anything I'd felt in years. I'm done, I said, more to myself than to Callum. I'm done trying. Callum didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. The weight of the moment was enough. The door creaked behind me as I stood outside, the sound of it shutting almost final, as if the house had just closed off an entire chapter of my life. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to go back in, if I was expected to make some grand exit, or if they even noticed I'd stepped out in the first place. They never really noticed me, not in the way I needed, not in the way anyone should be noticed by their family. I was aware of Callum standing just behind me, but he didn't try to push me back inside. He didn't make any suggestion of what I should do. For the first time, I felt like he understood without needing to say anything. It wasn't just me anymore. It was the two of us, standing on the edge of something together. And maybe that made it easier, or maybe it just made me feel a little less alone. I looked out at the empty street, the distant streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. It was quiet, too quiet, but in that silence, I could almost hear the muffled sounds of voices inside the house, laughter, my aunt's fake cheer, the clink of glasses. Everything inside that house felt so hollow, like it was all a performance and nothing real. I leaned against the cold brick of the porch, my fingers clutching the edge of the railing. Do you think they'll even notice I'm gone? I asked, more to the night air than to Callum. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he walked over to the edge of the porch and stood beside me, looking out at the street as well. After a moment, he spoke, his voice quiet but steady. They'll notice, he said softly, but not in the way you want them to. I didn't need him to elaborate. I knew exactly what he meant. They'd notice that I wasn't there, but they wouldn't question why. They wouldn't take the time to ask what had really happened, what had been building up for years. It would just be another one of those things they swept under the rug, like they always did with the unspoken tensions in our family. They'd keep going on as if nothing was different, and I'd keep standing here, outside, trying to figure out what came next. I sighed, the weight of everything pressing down on me again. It felt like all my life, I'd been told to be someone I wasn't, to play a part in their story, to fill a role that didn't quite fit me, but I was supposed to make it work anyway. But now, after everything, I realized that the part I was supposed to play no longer made sense to me. It never really had. You should leave, Callum said suddenly, his voice breaking through my thoughts. I mean it. Just go. You've been talking about it for years. I turned to look at him, surprised by the urgency in his tone. What do you mean, leave? I mean go. He repeated, a little more forcefully this time. Leave this place. Leave them. Go live your life. You don't need to keep pretending for them anymore. You've done enough of that. His words were sharp, but in a way that cut through the fog of confusion I'd been swimming in for so long. The idea of leaving had always felt too big, too impossible. But standing here with Callum, in the cold night, something about it felt doable. It didn't feel like a dramatic escape. It didn't feel like I had to make some huge declaration. It just felt like the next logical step, like I'd already been stepping away from them for years. And I was finally catching up to myself. I don't know where to go. I said quietly, the words slipping out without thinking. I don't know who I am outside of this. He turned to me, his face softened with something I couldn't quite place, maybe understanding. It doesn't matter, he said, his voice gentle now. You'll figure it out. You've always been able to. The weight of his words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could actually believe them. Maybe it didn't matter if I knew where I was going. Maybe I didn't need a plan. I just needed to move forward. Thanks, I said, not entirely sure what I was thanking him for, but feeling the need to say it anyway. Maybe for the fact that he was here. Maybe for reminding me that it was okay to let go. Maybe just for being the one person in this family who didn't expect me to stay in a place that wasn't mine. He nodded, giving me a small, reassuring smile. You don't have to thank me. Your family, I'm always here. I wasn't sure what to say to that. I wasn't sure if I even believed in family anymore, but standing here, with him at my side, I realized that maybe it didn't matter. Maybe family wasn't always blood. Maybe it was just the people who let you breathe without judgment. And in that moment, Callum was the only one who had ever really let me do that. A car drove by, the headlights briefly casting long shadows across the porch. I watched it disappear into the night, wondering if it was a metaphor for everything that had just shifted in me. Maybe it was. Are you going to go back inside? He asked, breaking the silence again. I took a long breath, the cold air stinging my lungs, and then shook my head. No, I said softly. Not tonight. Not ever again. I didn't know what the future held or what kind of person I was about to become. But I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to keep waiting for their approval. I wasn't going to keep pretending. Not for them. Not for anyone. I took a deep breath before turning away from Callum and heading toward the street. The pavement felt colder under my feet, like the whole world had frozen in place. But I didn't care. It wasn't about the cold or the distance anymore. It was about moving forward. About finally leaving something that wasn't meant for me. The house was still alive with noise behind me, but none of it felt like it was for me. It wasn't my laughter echoing through the walls. It wasn't my story they were telling, not really. I was just an extra character, lingering in the background of a script I didn't choose. A script that didn't fit. Asterisk, where are you going? Callum's voice was soft but firm, calling out from behind me. Asterisk. I turned back slightly, my eyes meeting his. He was still standing on the porch, watching me, waiting for an answer, and I realized, for the first time, that maybe he wasn't just concerned. Maybe he understood, too. Maybe he knew exactly what I was doing. Asterisk, I don't know, I said, a small laugh escaping my lips despite everything. But I can't stay there anymore. Asterisk, he nodded slowly, like he understood the weight of my decision, and didn't try to stop me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the pressure of someone else's expectations. No one was asking me to turn around, to go back inside, to make everything right again. For once, it was just me. Just the sound of my feet against the pavement, the cool night air, and the streetlights guiding me somewhere I couldn't quite see yet. Asterisk, I didn't have a destination in mind. Maybe I wasn't supposed to. Maybe that was part of the freedom. There was something terrifying about not having a plan, not knowing what came next. But there was something exhilarating about it too. The possibility. The blank page waiting to be written. Asterisk, I glanced back at the house one more time. The windows were lit up with warm yellow light, a stark contrast to the coldness I felt inside. Inside, they were probably still raising glasses, still congratulating each other, as though nothing had changed. But I knew everything had changed. For me, at least. Asterisk, I turned my back on the house and started walking. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe I'd go to a cafe, sit in the corner with a cup of coffee and think. Or maybe I'd just keep walking, until the night blurred into morning. I wasn't in a rush. I didn't have to be anywhere. I was free. Asterisk, are you sure? Callum asked again, this time quieter, almost like he was asking me if I was sure I could do this. I paused, standing still for just a moment before answering him. Yeah, I said, my voice steady. I'm sure. Asterisk, it was the first time in years that I could say it with confidence. And for the first time, I felt like I was doing something for me. Not for them. Not for anyone else. Just for me. Asterisk, the quiet of the street felt almost suffocating, like I was hearing the world through a filter. Each step felt heavier than the last, but I couldn't slow down. I wouldn't. The noise from the house behind me still seemed to pulse, like a distant thrum. I could almost hear the clink of glasses, the low murmur of voices, but none of it was real. Not to me. Asterisk, I kept walking, my footsteps rhythmic, the silence of the night wrapping around me like a blanket. It felt like the calm before a storm. But I didn't know what the storm would look like, or when it would hit. I only knew it was coming. Asterisk, my phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen lit up with a message from Mom. Where are you? We're waiting for you to join us. Asterisk, I paused for a moment, staring at the text. My fingers hovered over the keys, fighting the urge to reply. But what could I say? That I was outside, walking away from everything they had ever wanted for me, that I wasn't coming back, that I had no plans, no guarantees, just the weight of a decision that felt more right the further I got from that house. I slid the phone back into my pocket and kept walking. I hadn't expected any of this. I hadn't expected the warmth of the dinner, the forced smiles, or the harsh sting of Aunt Sarah's words. And I certainly hadn't expected to react like this. To just leave. I'd always been the one to stay, to endure, to keep my head down and carry on. But tonight, something had snapped inside me. That comment, you should have done more with your life, had been the final straw. I hadn't realized how badly I'd been carrying the weight of that expectation until it crushed me in that moment. It wasn't just a joke. It was a reminder of everything I had never been. Asterisk, I thought about what Aunt Sarah must have meant. She'd always been the one to speak her mind, to push people. But somehow I knew she wasn't talking about my career or my choices. She was talking about me, my place in this family. And suddenly, it hit me. I had never fit. I'd spent my whole life trying to find a way to belong, to be the version of me they wanted to see. But I didn't belong there. Not anymore. Asterisk, I stopped walking for a moment, taking in a deep breath. The air was cold but refreshing. The silence was like a blank canvas, waiting for me to do something with it. Asterisk, what now? Asterisk, I didn't have the answers, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel lost. Maybe that was the first step. Maybe the real journey had just begun. Asterisk, I started walking again. Faster this time, the weight of the decision lightening with every step. Asterisk, the sound of my keys in the door was the first sign that I was back. The second was the smell of the house, wood, polish, faint traces of last week's takeout, and something else I couldn't quite place. Home, but not home. Not anymore. Asterisk, I stepped inside, the warmth of the house rushing to meet me, but the comfort I once felt here had vanished. The walls seemed to be watching, judging, holding memories I was no longer sure I wanted. Asterisk, the moment I'd walked out of that house tonight, it felt like a door had closed behind me. And not just the literal one. A door to a version of myself I couldn't keep pretending to be. I wasn't the person they expected me to be anymore. I wasn't the one who smiled through their comments, who quietly accepted their jabs and just kept going. I couldn't be that version of myself again, not after tonight. Asterisk, I stood there, frozen, for a moment, staring into the empty space of the hallway. The echoes of Aunt Sarah's words still lingered, as if they were hanging in the air, like the smell of her perfume. I wasn't sure how long I stood there, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't want to go back to that table. I didn't want to be the person they had made me. Asterisk, I walked over to the kitchen and opened the fridge, the light flickering on as I scanned the shelves, looking for something familiar. But even the act of standing there, searching through the familiar, felt like an alien task. I didn't know who I was looking for. I didn't know what I was hoping to find. Asterisk, I pulled out a bottle of water and sat at the kitchen table. The soft creak of the chair beneath me seeming almost too loud in the silence. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. That something I had been too afraid to acknowledge for years had finally come to the surface. Asterisk, I took a long sip from the bottle. My reflection in the window catching my eye. The woman, staring back at me, was unfamiliar, but there was something stronger in her eyes. Something that hadn't been there before. Asterisk, I hadn't left to prove anything to anyone. I hadn't walked out of that dinner to make some grand statement. But somewhere between the hurt, the confusion, and the anger, I realized that the only person I had been trying to impress all these years was me. Asterisk, and now, for the first time, I was done trying to be someone else. Asterisk, I didn't expect anything to change overnight. After all, years of silence and unsaid words weren't going to be undone by a single outburst. But the strange thing was, when I woke up the next morning, I felt lighter. I'd said my piece. I'd finally cracked the surface of everything I'd been keeping bottled up inside. Asterisk, I walked into the kitchen, still half dazed from sleep, and my mind went straight to what had happened last night. The silence at the table after I spoke, the moment when everything went still. It wasn't like in the movies where everyone freezes and gasps in unison. No, it was more subtle, just a quiet ripple in the air. A small, awkward shift. I don't think anyone knew how to respond. Asterisk, but me. I felt a strange calm. For once, the guilt of holding back wasn't there. It was the first time in years that I didn't care what they thought. Maybe I was starting to see them clearly. The constant expectations, the subtle manipulations, the way they all unknowingly pulled each other's strings. Asterisk, the phone buzzed on the counter. My heart skipped a beat when I saw it was a message from Aunt Sarah. My first instinct was to ignore it. I didn't owe her anything. But something in me pushed the thought aside. I opened it. Asterisk, I didn't mean to hurt you last night. You know I love you, right? Asterisk, I read the message twice before putting the phone down. Did she love me? Or did she love the version of me that kept quiet, that followed the script they all had for me? The daughter who kept pretending to be okay, who didn't ruffle feathers, who never upset the apple cart? Asterisk, it was hard to tell. Really. Asterisk, I ran my fingers over the edge of the counter, trying to shake off the nagging doubt creeping up my spine. But then again, I wasn't about to apologize for speaking the truth. Not anymore. Asterisk, another text came in, this time from my cousin, the one whose promotion we'd all been celebrating. Asterisk, hey, I know last night was awkward, but I'm proud of you, okay, always have been. Asterisk, proud of me. I couldn't remember the last time anyone in this family had said that. The words hung there, floating in the air like a gift that wasn't really for me. Maybe it was their way of apologizing without saying the words outright. But even then, it didn't feel real. Not yet. Asterisk, I put my phone down again, this time more resolutely. The messages, the guilt, the emotions, they weren't going to fix anything. I wasn't going to let them keep me here in this limbo. If I wanted to move forward, I had to stop waiting for them to catch up. I had to find my own way. The days after the dinner were a strange kind of limbo. Nothing immediately shifted, but everything felt different. Every time I saw a family member, it was like looking at them through a glass, somehow distant, yet painfully close. I'd always known they were flawed, but now, their flaws were more obvious. More glaring. I'd bumped into Aunt Sarah at the grocery store a couple of days later. She'd looked at me like she wasn't sure if she should say something. For a moment, I thought, she might just keep walking, but she stopped. Her eyes were apologetic but guarded. I couldn't quite place it. Are you doing okay? She asked, her voice softer than I expected. I nodded, even though I wasn't entirely sure. I didn't know how to answer that question honestly. How do you tell someone that you've been suffocating under their expectations for years? That the life they wanted for you wasn't the one you chose, but you've been playing along anyway? How do you tell someone who's always held the strings that you've cut them? I'm fine, I said, forcing a smile. It was all I could manage. I didn't mean what I said, she continued, shifting uncomfortably on her feet. You know how I am. I was just trying to make a joke. I didn't respond immediately. The urge to say something biting, something harsh, rose within me, but I swallowed it down. No need to drag this out, not now. I know, I said instead. It's okay. The words felt hollow. But they were enough to send her off. Back into her world of surface-level apologies and well-meaning but misguided attempts at connection. I'd given her what she wanted, a way to move past it without acknowledging the depth of what had just happened. I had become the bigger person, but it left a bitter taste in my mouth. There was no real closure in the way they handled things. They never dealt with the core of anything. As I left the store, the weight of it all settled on me again. I wasn't fine, not really. I'd taken a step, yes, but there were still miles to go, and it wouldn't be easy. But I wasn't afraid of the work anymore. The pain of speaking up, of exposing the cracks in our family, was real. But it was nothing compared to the years I'd spent pretending everything was fine. I could feel the shift inside me. Even if no one else did yet, the process had begun. I was done being the family's scapegoat. I was done playing the part of the perfect daughter. The one who never caused trouble. It was time for me to stop waiting for them to change. It was time to move on. The days that followed felt quieter somehow, like the space between me and the family had stretched a little further. I could sense it in the way they looked at me, like they weren't sure what to say or how to behave around me anymore. It was strange, almost like I was now a stranger in a family I'd known all my life. My mom called me one evening, and I could tell she was trying to sound casual, but there was an edge to her voice. Just checking in. How are you? She asked, a little too brightly. I paused. My instinct was to tell her everything, the way I felt, how it was hard to shake off that dinner conversation, how I was tired of being judged, of always falling short of their expectations. But instead, I went with the easy answer. I'm good, just keeping busy. There was a silence on the other end, as if she were trying to gauge whether I was telling the truth. I knew she wouldn't like the answer I didn't give, so I kept it simple. The silence between us stretched for a little too long before she spoke again. Well, your aunt's been calling, trying to make things right. She feels bad about what happened. I swallowed hard, trying to push the anger down. The fact that Aunt Sarah had called to apologize didn't surprise me, but what did surprise me was how quickly they all tried to sweep it under the rug. As though one phone call, one apology, could undo the years of condescension, the moments where they'd belittled my life choices, my independence, all for the sake of their comfort. I know, she mentioned it, I said flatly, unwilling to dive into it. There was another pause before Mom continued, softer this time. Maybe you should try to talk to her, it could help. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of her words pressing down on me. There it was again, the idea that I needed to fix things. The pressure to reconcile when all I really wanted was for them to understand. For them to acknowledge what they'd done. I'll think about it, I replied, but, in truth, I didn't want to. I didn't want to fix anything. I didn't want to pretend that everything could go back to how it was. I don't want you to feel like you can't talk to us, Mom said. We're your family. I know, I replied quietly. But I wasn't sure anymore. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that my family wasn't the place where I felt safest. It wasn't where I found support or validation. It wasn't where I found my voice. Asterisk, I'll see you soon. Mom said, her voice lighter now, as if the conversation had taken a turn she was comfortable with. Asterisk, yeah, take care, I replied. Before hanging up, asterisk, I stood there for a long moment, staring at the phone in my hand. I wasn't angry with my mom, or even Aunt Sarah. I was angry at myself for allowing this situation to go on for so long. For not standing up for myself when I should have. But that was changing. That was the part I was working on. Asterisk, it wasn't just about what they wanted from me anymore. It was about what I needed, what I deserved. Asterisk, I wasn't waiting for them to change. I was changing. Asterisk, the following weekend, I received an unexpected invitation. It came in the form of a text from my cousin, Ben. He'd been the one to get the promotion. The one who'd been at the center of that dinner. The one who'd been the golden child. We hadn't spoken much since that night, and to be honest, I hadn't expected to hear from him. Asterisk, hey, we're having a family get-together next Saturday. Just a small thing. Mum's making dinner. You should come. Asterisk, it took me a moment to process. Was this some kind of olive branch? A peace offering from the family? Or just an attempt to act like nothing had happened? Asterisk, I stared at the screen, trying to decide what to do. It had been days, maybe even weeks, since that dinner, and the silence had only made the tension more unbearable. I had been waiting for them to reach out, for them to acknowledge what had been said and done, but they hadn't. Not really. Asterisk, and now, Ben was inviting me. Asterisk, I wasn't sure if I was ready to walk back into that space again, not without saying something. But maybe this was an opportunity to do that, say something, stand up for myself, and show them that I wasn't going to be swept under the rug. I tapped out a quick reply. I'll come, but I'm not pretending like nothing happened. A beat passed before the reply came through. Understood. See you then. Asterisk, there it was. I couldn't back out now. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I wasn't going to let them think I'd just forgotten about what had been said. It was time to face it, and face them. Even if I wasn't sure I was ready. Asterisk, Saturday came faster than I anticipated, and by the time I arrived at Ben's house, I was already myself. The nerves were creeping in, but I pushed them down, telling myself that I was doing the right thing. I wasn't going to let the family continue to walk all over me. Asterisk, I stepped inside the house, and the familiar smells of Mom's cooking greeted me. The chatter from the kitchen sounded warm and inviting, but it felt a little foreign now. The awkwardness I'd been carrying around weighed on me. Asterisk, Ben greeted me at the door with a hug. And despite everything that had happened, I found myself hugging him back. It wasn't his fault, after all. He was just caught in the middle of it all. Asterisk, good to see you, he said, his smile a little forced, though he was trying to keep things light. You too, I replied, not really knowing how to act. The family was already gathered around the table, and as I walked in, all eyes turned toward me. My aunt, my uncle, even my mom, all of them paused for a second. But no one said anything about what had happened. No one acknowledged the elephant in the room. Asterisk, I took my seat, my eyes scanning the room, looking for any sign that they knew the gravity of what had been said, that they understood the hurt behind it. But all I saw were smiles, small talk, the usual surface-level pleasantries. And just like that, I felt it again, the distance. Asterisk, but this time, it didn't feel like a crack. In my confidence, it felt like I was starting to see them for what they really were, and that was a start. Asterisk, as dinner continued, I stayed quiet, not out of anger, but because I didn't know what to say. It wasn't the time for a confrontation. But it also wasn't the time to pretend that everything was fine. Asterisk, as dessert was served, I stood up, breaking the silence with one simple sentence. Asterisk, I need to talk to Aunt Sarah. Asterisk, I didn't wait for any reactions before walking toward her. The room was suddenly quieter, the air thicker. Asterisk, I could feel the weight of the room behind me as I walked toward Aunt Sarah. Her face was a mix of surprise and uncertainty as I stood in front of her. I don't think she expected me to confront her like this, not after everything had settled into an uneasy silence. But I was done with silence. Asterisk, Aunt Sarah, I said, my voice steady but firm. We need to talk. Asterisk, her smile faltered, and I saw the flicker of discomfort cross her features. She shifted slightly in her chair, her eyes darting over to the family, as if expecting someone to step in. But no one did. No one ever did when it came to her. Asterisk, she cleared her throat. What about? I'm done pretending that what you said the other night didn't matter, I replied, keeping my tone calm, controlled. I wasn't going to let myself slip into that place where I'd been before, the place where I allowed her words to sting. Without speaking up, Aunt Sarah's expression softened a little, but it didn't reach her eyes. I didn't mean to upset you. You know how I am, I joke around. No, you didn't just joke around. You made a point of putting me down in front of everyone. In front of Ben. In front of the family. I was starting to feel the anger bubble up, but I held it back, letting the words come out carefully. You told me I should have done more with my life, like what I've done isn't enough. Like I don't matter. She blinked, her gaze flicking to the others, but no one was making eye contact with her. The uncomfortable tension filled the air, and I could feel the heat rise in my cheeks. I didn't care anymore. I was done swallowing everything they threw at me. I didn't think it would be that big of a deal, she said, her voice softening, but it felt like she was trying to downplay it. You know I love you, I don't always think before I speak. I let out a breath, forcing myself to stay grounded. That's the thing, Aunt Sarah, you never think before you speak. And I've been letting it slide for too long, but not anymore. Her eyes narrowed, the defensive stance creeping back in. I didn't mean anything by it. Honestly, I didn't. I was just ... Just what? I interrupted, finally letting the frustration seep through. You were just trying to make me feel small. Make me feel like I don't measure up. Because you know what? I've been measuring up to everyone's expectations for far too long, and it's exhausting. I could see her struggling to find the right words, but I wasn't giving her an out this time. I wasn't going to let her slip away from this. I don't need to be anyone else's idea of success. I'm done chasing that, I said, my voice gaining strength with every word. I've been chasing my own dreams, my own life. And it's more than enough. There was a long pause between us. She didn't say anything for a moment, and I could see her trying to process what I had said. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the closest she would get. I waited, giving her space to speak, but when she didn't, I took a step back. I wasn't sure if this conversation had shifted anything for her, but I knew it had shifted something in me. I had finally spoken my truth, and that was all I could do. The ball was in her court now. I turned to walk back to the table, feeling like a weight had been lifted, but there was still a knot in my stomach. I wasn't sure what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, I wasn't worried about keeping the peace. I wasn't worried about being the person they all expected me to be. I sat back down at the table, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. My hands were shaking slightly as I reached for my wine glass, the familiar taste of red filling my mouth. I could feel the eyes on me, the way the atmosphere had shifted after that conversation. It wasn't just Aunt Sarah who had been silenced. The whole table had gone eerily quiet. Even Ben, who usually never hesitated to insert his opinion, was looking at me like he'd never seen me before. I didn't care. Not anymore. I kept my eyes fixed on my glass, pretending to focus on the swirling red liquid, but my mind was racing. What had just happened? I had spoken my truth, but now that it was out there, I felt both liberated and exposed. It wasn't like me to be so direct, so unapologetic, and it felt strange. I wasn't used to this version of myself, the version that didn't shrink away from confrontation, the version that didn't cower when things got uncomfortable. Are you okay? Ben's voice cut through the silence. It was soft, almost tentative, like he wasn't sure how to approach me after what had just gone down. He was the one who always kept the peace in this family, always the buffer. But not this time. I looked up at him, meeting his eyes. His expression was a mixture of concern and something else, something I couldn't quite place. Maybe he was proud of me. Maybe he was just surprised to see me stand up for myself. Either way, I wasn't interested in making him feel better right now. I'm fine, I said, my voice steady but tinged with the edge that had been missing for so long. Just needed to say what I needed to say. The room was still heavy with tension. Aunt Sarah hadn't said another word, but I could feel her simmering, her discomfort radiating across the table. She wasn't going to apologize. That wasn't her style. But the silence spoke volumes, and for once, it felt like I had the upper hand. It wasn't until my mother cleared her throat that the air began to shift, though not in the way I expected. Well, we're all family here, right? she said, trying to lighten the mood. But her voice sounded off, strained, almost like she was walking on eggshells. Asterisk, I didn't answer. I didn't need to, I had said my piece. Asterisk, why don't we just forget about all this and enjoy the rest of the evening? My aunt's voice was tight now, her earlier confidence completely gone. She was trying to reclaim control of the situation, but it was too late for that. Asterisk, I wasn't going to let her brush this under the rug. Not anymore. Asterisk, no. Aunt Sarah, I said quietly, my voice cutting through the attempt at normalcy. This is the part where we don't just forget. This is the part where you actually listen. Asterisk, for a moment, everything felt suspended in time. The weight of what I had just said hung in the air, but it wasn't just my words that were making the silence so thick. It was the realization that I wasn't going to be the person I used to be. The person who accepted the passive-aggressive comments. The one who silently took everything and never spoke up. That version of me was gone. Asterisk, Aunt Sarah opened her mouth like she was going to say something, but she didn't. Instead, she let out a frustrated breath and finally dropped her gaze. Her eyes flicking to the side as if she was looking for an escape. Asterisk, well, this is awkward, my cousin Sam said with an awkward laugh, trying to diffuse the moment. But it wasn't just awkward, it was necessary. And for once, I didn't mind the discomfort. It was the only way to move forward. Asterisk, the tension didn't dissipate entirely, but it didn't feel as suffocating either. It was still there, but it was different now? It was a kind of quiet acceptance that things had shifted, that there was no going back to the way things were before. Not after everything I'd said. Not after everything I'd felt. Asterisk, I wasn't sure what would happen next, but I knew this. I wasn't going to shrink anymore. I wasn't going to apologize for speaking my truth. Asterisk, the night stretched on. But the energy at the table had completely changed. Gone were the moments of lighthearted banter and easy laughter. Instead, there was an undercurrent of something more, something raw and unsettling. People were still eating, still drinking, but it all felt like a performance now. Everyone was playing a part, pretending things were normal, when we all knew they weren't. Asterisk, I could see my mother still trying to orchestrate the evening. Her attempts at smoothing over the tension becoming increasingly strained. She passed me a smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I didn't know if she was embarrassed for me or disappointed in me, but I could see her struggle to figure out how to handle this new version of me. It was foreign to her. Asterisk, what's going on, love? Ben leaned in slightly, his voice quiet, enough that only I could hear him. His tone wasn't judgmental, just curious. Like he was trying to make sense of what had happened. Asterisk, I wanted to tell him everything. The frustration, the years of suppressing my feelings for the sake of keeping the peace, the exhaustion of pretending I was okay with being invisible in my own family, but there was no way to say it all in just one sentence. Asterisk, I think I just had enough. I said, shrugging slightly as if the words didn't mean as much as they actually did. Just couldn't keep pretending anymore. Asterisk, Ben didn't respond. Immediately, he just nodded, a small, understanding smile tugging at the corners of his lips. I appreciated that he didn't push me for more, that he let me say only as much as I was willing to share. I wasn't ready to tell him everything just yet. Asterisk, the conversation around the table continued, but my attention drifted in and out. I wasn't interested in hearing about Sam's promotion anymore or listening to Aunt Sarah try to justify herself with weak, half-hearted apologies. I just wanted to be done with it, to leave this place and not look back. Asterisk, but then, like a slap to the face, Aunt Sarah caught my eye. She wasn't looking at me with anger anymore. She wasn't making excuses. No, now she looked almost vulnerable. It was strange, but I could see the guilt in her eyes. She didn't want to be the villain in this family dynamic, but she didn't know how to fix things either. Asterisk, can we talk? She asked, her voice quieter than before. Asterisk, I glanced at her, unsure of what she could possibly have to say. After everything that had happened, I wasn't sure I was ready to hear it. But I nodded anyway, taking another sip of my wine. Asterisk, fine, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me react. Not anymore. We excused ourselves from the table, stepping into the kitchen where the air was cooler. The house felt too small now, too stifling. It was as though the walls themselves were closing in, and there was no way to escape it. Asterisk, Aunt Sarah folded her arms across her chest, looking at me like she wasn't sure how to begin. Look, she said slowly, I wasn't trying to make you feel small. I've always been proud of you, you know. But sometimes, I forget that. I forget that we all have different lives. Asterisk, I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She had to come to this realization on her own. Asterisk, you've always been so much more than I gave you credit for, she continued, her voice catching slightly. I don't know why I said that. I shouldn't have. I should have been more supportive. Asterisk, I stared at her for a long moment. I didn't know if I could forgive her right then and there. But I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I had been earlier. The anger had shifted, settled into something different. Asterisk, you should have said this a long time ago. I finally said, but thanks, I guess. Asterisk, she nodded, her face a mixture of guilt and relief. I'm sorry. I really am. Asterisk, I wasn't sure if I believed her, but it didn't matter. The truth had been spoken, and the weight of it was starting to lift. I didn't need her to validate me anymore. I didn't need anyone's approval. Asterisk, I'll be okay, I said softly. And for the first time in years, I actually believed it. Asterisk, the night ended in an awkward silence, but it wasn't the same kind of suffocating silence from earlier. It was quieter, yes, but it was a peace that had finally settled in after the storm. There was no more pretending, no more tiptoeing around truths that had been buried for far too long. I felt lighter somehow, as if I'd shed the weight of all the years I'd spent trying to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. Asterisk, as we all filtered out of the house. The laughter from earlier had faded, but I couldn't help but feel like something had changed for good. Maybe it was the apology from Aunt Sarah, or maybe it was the way I had stood up for myself in a way I'd never done before. Whatever it was, I knew I couldn't go back to the way things had been. Not after tonight. Asterisk, I stood by the car, waiting for Ben to finish saying his goodbyes. It felt strange to be this far from the table, from the chaos, and yet so close to the real world. The world where I had a life that mattered, where my choices were mine to make. The world where I didn't have to shrink myself to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be. Asterisk, Ben came over, slipping his hand into mine without saying a word. We didn't need to speak. The comfort of his touch was enough. Asterisk, you all right? He asked quietly, as if reading my mind. Asterisk, yeah, I said, my voice steady. I think I'm finally all right. Asterisk, we didn't need to elaborate. There was a long, comfortable silence as we stood there, waiting for the last of the family to pile into their cars. The air was cool, the stars above bright in the clear sky. The weight of the evening had left me, and in its place, there was only quiet resolution. Asterisk, when everyone was finally gone, Ben and I headed home. I didn't have a plan for what came next, but for the first time in ages, I wasn't worried. The past was still there, but it didn't have the same hold on me anymore. I was free, in a way I hadn't been before. I didn't need to seek approval from anyone. Not from my parents, not from my aunt, not from anyone. Asterisk, I'd finally found my voice. And with that, I had found my way forward. Asterisk, it wasn't going to be easy, and I wasn't going to suddenly have everything figured out. But I was okay with that now. I was ready to make my own decisions, to choose my own path, and to never look back. Asterisk, as we drove down the quiet streets, I glanced over at Ben, and for the first time that night, I smiled, a real smile. It wasn't about the family dinner, or the apology, or the awkwardness that had followed. It was about me, and the life I was finally starting to live for myself. Asterisk,